I was shaking with rage the day they called the cops on my wife for simply refusing to join the HOA. I mean, can you believe that? My wife, who hadn't done a thing but politely say no thanks to the neighborhood busybodies, now facing a sheriff at our front door while the HOA president shrieked about corrupting community authority. You ever have one of those moments where the world just tilts sideways and you think, yeah, this is really happening? That was me, watching as Carol stood calm as a rock, while Margaret, the president, decked out in a khaki uniform that screamed middle management at a copier store, ranted about arrest warrants and community standards. But the wildest part? The sheriff didn't take the bait. He looked Margaret dead in the eye and asked one simple question: "Show me your orders." Right then, I knew we weren't in Kansas anymore. That moment lit a fuse that would end up blowing open every dark secret in Lakewood Estates. Moving out here was supposed to be a fresh start for us. A quiet place by the water, a dock where I could teach our 12-year-old daughter, Emma, how to cast a line, neighbors who waved instead of scowled. And for a few days, it was just that, with sun glittering off the lake and that sweet small-town feeling where people nod at you in the grocery store. But you know how it is, things can change on a dime. Let me back up a sec. The first crack in the idyllic suburbia vibe came on a Tuesday morning. Margaret Thompson at our front step, clipboard, logo polo, khakis you could eat dinner off. She gave us that forced welcome smile, told us all about how everyone joins for community protection, and that it was time to get registered with our obligations. Then she dropped a bomb, rattled off details about our mortgage, my work, even Emma's school tuition. Carol and I locked eyes. I've done insurance fraud investigation for a living, and let me tell you, my alarm bells were screaming. But Carol? She was cool as ice, snapping pictures of every paper Margaret handed over, moving with the kind of deliberate confidence you only see in people who have nothing left to prove. I didn't know it yet, but my wife was running circles around Margaret. When Carol calmly declined to join, Margaret's expression twisted through shock and confusion to straight-up panic. People didn't say no to her, at least not in Lakewood Estates. Then Carol demanded to see Margaret's legal authority and HOA formation docs, using language that, frankly, made me wonder what kind of consulting she really did for work. Margaret fumbled out some documents with all the trimmings, seals, signatures, the whole 9 yards. But Carol dissected them with the eye of a federal prosecutor, pointing out trace signatures, the wrong watermarks, weird formatting. I just stood there, feeling like I'd married Jason Bourne in yoga pants. A few days later, Margaret came back with a mandatory community assessment, $1,500 due immediately for emergency repairs. The papers looked official, but my fraud radar was pinging off the charts. So, I did what I do best, pulled out my loop, checked the font matches, legal language, all of it. It was too perfect, too polished. That's when I realized this wasn't just HOA strong-arming. It was a whole production, and Carol was quietly building a case the whole time. Every encounter, every piece of paper, she documented everything, asked strategic questions, never once let her emotions slip. But just when I thought things couldn't get weirder, in walked Deborah Lewis. She looked like the ultimate suburban grandma, silver hair, soft voice, cookies still warm on a plate. But the way she questioned us was anything but sweet. She probed for Carol's schedule, my clients, even asked if we'd lived in government housing. She never forgot a detail. A week after her visit, neighbors started acting strange. Kids grilling Emma about her mom's job, folks at the bus stop asking about our routines. Stuff was flying around the local forum. New residents think they're above community standards, refuse to participate in safety protocols. It felt like we'd moved into a fishbowl. Carol, though, never flinched. She treated every escalation, anonymous complaints, financial threats, sudden community surveys, with that same eerie calm, like she'd seen all these plays before. I started wondering if her consulting background had a little more law enforcement in it than she let on. My suspicions hit a fever pitch the day I found the trail camera hidden in the bushes by our fence. It wasn't some wildlife cam either. This was pro-grade, weatherproofed, locked in on our kitchen window with the precision of a sniper. When I showed Carol, she just asked for a screwdriver and took the thing apart, muttering something about evidence handling. Then there was Deborah, our sweet neighbor, who suddenly seemed to pop up every time I had a business call, always with another plate of cookies, always curious about my work. After a fake phone conversation about a bogus agricultural case, she asked about it the next day. That wasn't nosiness. That was intel gathering. Community pressure ramped up, anonymous posts, rumors to my clients. One big account canceled because someone tipped them off about questionable business practices. That's when Patricia, the single mom from down the street, confided in me. She'd been pressured to dig into Carol's schedule for meeting planning, but the level of detail they wanted was way beyond scheduling. It was surveillance, plain and simple. Patricia's story broke something loose. She told me Margaret and Deborah kept files on everyone, single parents, retirees, families dealing with illness. They'd target your weakest spot and squeeze until you complied. When Emma came home crying that kids were saying her mom was an FBI agent spying on the neighborhood, I finally snapped. I confronted Carol, and all she said was, "I can't discuss active work matters." Yeah, that happened. She sounded more like a G-man than my wife. Then came the bombshell, viral video of Margaret's meltdown at our doorstep. Carol standing there like the last honest person in a city of liars. Margaret ranting about federal employees undermining community order. The comments went nuclear, people quoting our license plates, Carol's work hours, security camera footage, the works. Somebody was leaking classified level details. One night, I set a trap, made a fake federal coordination call from my locked office. Within hours, Deborah was at the door, brownies in hand, asking about my work with federal agencies. Later, I found footprints under my window and marks from surveillance gear in the mulch. I started digging through Margaret's documents and found signatures lifted from public foreclosure records, federal watermarks from training materials. This was inside job level forgery. Margaret was just the front. Someone way more dangerous was running the show. The next day, Patricia brought me a folder Deborah had left behind. Inside, photos of Carol entering a federal building, highlighted schedules, personnel files, surveillance from multiple angles, pro-level stuff. Deborah was targeting families across the whole neighborhood, building dossiers, financial info, work history, even medical records, on everyone. And suddenly, my cookie lady neighbor looked a lot more like a criminal mastermind. The night I caught Deborah outside my window with pro-surveillance gear, all pretense dropped. She was no grandma. She was a cold, methodical operator. Carol finally came clean at 2 a.m. She opened the safe, pulled out a badge, and said, "I'm Special Agent Carol Harris, FBI Financial Crimes. I've been undercover for 18 months investigating organized residential fraud. You could have knocked me over with a feather." Everything clicked, the legalese, the calm, the government sedan. I'd married a Fed, and she was building a case the whole time. She explained the rules. She couldn't act until the crimes crossed into federal jurisdiction. But now we had the evidence. Document forgery, identity theft, multi-state fraud, insider access to government databases. Deborah's files weren't just neighborly gossip. They were weapons in a full-scale intelligence operation. Carol coordinated with the feds. Patricia turned witness. Margaret confessed, and the whole house of cards came crashing down. The community's shock was absolute. Nobody suspected the sweet volunteer grandma was coordinating one of the biggest suburban fraud rings in the country. When the day of reckoning came, Margaret melted down, sobbing that she'd just been desperate to keep her house, used as a pawn. Deborah? She doubled down, walking up to the sheriff with a fake federal badge and claiming an ongoing investigation. But the sheriff didn't blink. "Show me your orders," he said, and Deborah's house of lies collapsed for good. Carol presented her real FBI credentials, and for the first time, the community realized they'd been supporting criminals while hounding the one person who could actually help. The fallout was epic, federal agents swarming, forensics teams gathering every shred of evidence, neighbors filming the whole thing for posterity. Deborah was charged with everything from identity theft to impersonating a federal officer. Margaret, broken by the realization of what she'd been part of, got probation and help. Patricia, who bravely exposed the operation, was finally free from blackmail and fear. And just when we thought it was over, Deborah whispered something to Carol at the arrest that made my wife's face go white as a sheet. To this day, I don't know what she said. Maybe the network is bigger. Maybe it's not over. But for now, our family and this community got a second chance. Patricia started a real neighborhood watch. People started trusting again, And Carol now teaches other agents how to spot fraud in places nobody ever looks. So if you ever find yourself facing down fake authority, demand the orders, trust your gut, and don't let anyone bully you into silence. Real justice is transparent, and real community is built on courage. And hey, tell me in the comments, what would you do if your neighbor turned out to be running a criminal syndicate? Where do you draw the line between trust and suspicion? Let's hear your stories. Because if this mess taught me anything, it's that the real fight for justice starts with folks who refuse to be intimidated.